According to the National Institute of Mental Health, a traumatic event is a shocking, scary, or dangerous experience that may affect someone emotionally and physically. And according to the American Psychiatric Association, post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, is a psychiatric disorder that may occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event. As you may have noticed, traumatic events and PTSD are directly related to each other, meaning that when a traumatic event happens, PTSD comes right after. Good morning, my name is Bernardo Mello, and today I'll be presenting the effects of PTSD resulting from sexual assault in the lives of the youth. My research question is, to what extent does PTSD resulting from sexual assault impact the physical health, mental health, social relationships, self-esteem, and substance abuse of the youth? My argument is that PTSD resulting from sexual assault will negatively impact the physical health, mental health, social relationships, self-esteem, and lead to substance abuse among the youth. As you all know, our physical health is the first thing tested to find someone's mental health, to someone's physical health. That's why it's the first thing tested to find whether someone who suffered a traumatic event is healthy or not. As you can see, this visual from the state journals shows how sexual assault severity leads to psychological health issues such as PTSD symptoms, and how those issues lead to further physical health issues such as drinking problems and physical health symptoms. Although this graph doesn't specifically talk about how it affects the youth, this quote from the National Child Traumatic Stress Network explains it. Young children who experience trauma are at a particular risk because their rapidly developing brains are very vulnerable. Early childhood trauma has been associated with reduced size of brain cortex. This area is responsible for many complex functions, including memory, attention, perceptual awareness, thinking, language, and consciousness. These changes may affect IQ and the ability to regulate emotions, and the child may become more fearful and may not feel as safe or as protected. But how can we solve these issues? An imperative task as early detection of symptoms of CPTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, may enable early and appropriate treatment for children in need and prevent long-term debilitating and physical and mental health problems associated with trauma exposure. These quotes shows how many issues traumatic events lead to in the youth and how they can be solved with early and appropriate treatment. After physical, mental health is the next biggest factor in determining someone's wellness. Sometimes the mental health struggles after PTSD are even bigger than the physical health struggles. One example of that is Simone Biles, one of the greatest gymnasts in the history of the sport, who suffered sexual assault by the USA gymnast Dr. Larry Nassar when she was only 18 years old. 6 years later, she withdrew from the 2021 gymnastic team finals in Tokyo because of her mental health. After withdrawing, Simone said, "I know the stillness of courage, the part that requires looking at yourself and having that hard conversation. I can't do it. I am overwhelmed. I do need help. I am failing. I'm not as together as I portray. Mirrors can make formidable opponents." This quote from the College Board provided stimulus shows how bad her mental health was at that time and why she withdrew. In a later interview, when asked if being sexually assaulted impacted her decision in the 2021 Summer Olympics, Simone said, "Now that I think of it, maybe. Like in the back of my head, there are certain triggers that you don't even know, and I think it could have." This shows how sexual assault did impact her decision in the 2021 Summer Olympics. PTSD resulting from sexual assault doesn't only affect the survivors within his body, it also affects his overall life. As you can see, this graph from the semantic scholars shows the cascading effects of PTSD from sexual assault leading to quaternary impacts. It also shows some of the effects as dating avoidance, dating apprehension, and risky dating, and how the effects of PTSD lead to its reoccurrence, making it an infinite cycle of issues if not treated correctly. However, one of the most important aspects is arguably the survivor's happiness with themselves, called self-esteem. The survivor's self-esteem indicates how their recovery process is going. Non-prospective studies suggest that adolescents victims of sexual violence are at increased risk of low self-esteem compared to non-affected peers. And in addition, youths reporting high caregiver support initially report higher self-esteem and less depression 1 year later. These goals show how low self-esteem is expected on survivors, and how self-esteem and depression have an inverse relationship, meaning that when depression is low, self-esteem is high, and vice versa. This graph shows how traumatic events lead to Ptsd symptoms, which lead to low self-esteem, which lead to further symptoms such as depression and suicidal thoughts. The profound sadness caused by all of the factors PTSD resulted from sexual assault causes in the youth can cause the survivors to want to alleviate their pain at any cost, including drinking, smoking, and using other drugs. Substance abuse among the youth not only leads to multiple health issues, but also worsens PTSD symptoms. PTSD caused by sexual assault in the youth will be a life-lasting issue and cannot be solved. But there are ways to reduce the probability of it happening and ways to recover faster from it. Some of those are looking for a professional to assist you in the recovery process, early detection of PTSD, so you can go to a professional as fast as possible and have the most efficient recovery possible, and support the survivor. By supporting the survivor, not only do you make sure that they're healthy and good, but you also help them like mentally and overall help them just in general. But with the solutions, there are also some limitations. People don't take it seriously and think PTSD just goes away and solve this on its own. Most people don't know how to detect symptoms and will just find out they have PTSD after another traumatic event. And not giving sufficient attention will cause survivors to feel alone and depressed, which only worsens it. All of the solutions aim to reduce the impacts of PTSD from sexual assault in the youth and facilitate the recovery process. And if everyone follows them, less youth survivors of sexual assault will have their futures affected by it. You know, we're excited. Thank you.
All right, 2 questions for you. First up, what evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and then why didn't you use it?
So at the beginning of my research question was different. I was initially looking at how traumatic events in general affected the relationships of the youth. So my first couple of resources were about that, so I ended up not using those as I changed my research question.
All right, and what advice would you have for people who want to do this, look at this topic for the future?
So one advice I have is to find graphs and pictures that prove what you're saying, because as we're talking about a lot of health issues and problems and diseases, it's really confusing for the viewers. And I think with images and graphs, we can really show easier to the people watching.
You were